Hello, and welcome to On the Couch, Conversations with Brenda Porter. Please like us, subscribe, and comment below. Today's guest is Garry Yates. Garry Yates is an actor of stage and film. He is a director and he is an instructor, and I am looking forward to our conversation with him today. Welcome, Garry.
Hello, Brenda. How are you?
I am great. I'm excited about sitting down on the couch with you because you are a plethora of information. You direct.
Yes.
And you have been directing professionally and you've been directing academically. Talk to me about the difference between directing with students and directing with professionals.
Well, it's not that big of a difference for me. And the reason why it's not really that big difference is that I think there are certain directors who are different type of directors in what they bring to the table in everything they direct. I am a teacher director in that I don't mind teaching as I direct. And that's a component of what I do. And a lot of times when there are new actors and the teaching is just not, it's not just with actors, it's sometimes with technical students or crew. Um, and most artistic people know that I have this educational relationship with students and training people, period, in the arts, in that they will give me a unseasoned technical person or unseasoned actor because they know that they're going to possibly learn something as they do the job as a talent or a technician. I said the biggest part about the difference is that it's just the skill level. The skill level. I both experiences, whether it's professional or whether it's for student, it's both exciting. Um, I tend to get more excited about working with the students. Um, but then there's this element about working with professionals. It really freaks me out, and I'm one of those actors too. That's exciting. Is that first read, and I used to have my students come in and see the first read of professionals at a rehearsal, and it's like we're so focused and so good at what we do. It looks like we've been sitting there together for 2 weeks or so, and that's the first read. And then I get students who do the same thing once they witness it, they go, "Wow, they don't know each other." I said, "No, they just met each other." And it's just the commitment, and that's the lesson. That's a lesson for them that I want them to get. So what do I get? I love the process of the young people, but I love the beginning process of working with professionals. It's just so awesome how they come right on point.
Now, you're an actor and a director. Did you act first or direct first?
I acted first. Um, started acting in high school, and actually I did. We would have orientations for high school, and I would do the one man show for the freshmen who were coming in, and the whole school was there. And basically, I wrote my script, um, where I took them through the journey of being a freshman and getting lost in classes, going down the hallway and things like that, and you know. So that was my introduction to acting,
Wow.
and then I started working with the local acting group in Memphis, Tennessee, where I grew up, and that was a lot of wonderful, I guess, theatricians there, African American theatricians who really contributed to the history of theater in Memphis, and Florence, her name was Florence Roach, and I can't think of the other woman's name. But anyway, there were avenues where I could participate in theater in the city. Her name was Irma Clanton. And it's a wonderful show. And it was a show that toured around, it was called Righteous Times. And it toured around the country, and it was a very interesting piece. And when you go back into history, you'll be able to find the play. But yeah, so I started acting, and I directed my first piece in in undergrad. My first piece, and I wrote my first play in undergrad, um, which was influenced by a play called Sister My Sister by Rhea Rahan. Um, and the name of the play was Lisa, Can You Come Out to Play? And I still have a copy of it. Uh, and so I just knew one day I would act in it. I still got it. I'm going to refresh it. It's an interesting play, strange. Um, and so, yeah, acting has been a big part of what I've been doing. And so I gradually moved into directing and then teaching.
So, and acting, you've acted on stage and in film and in Atlanta and in California and various other places. As you travel from, the East Coast to the West Coast, what do you see as the differences in the acting styles, the acting commitment?
I think the skill levels are basically the same, and I think it's how you approach it, um, and it's so reflective of the community that you're working in. We always hear that L.A., which I spent a lot of time, is more a relaxed place, and New York is fast paced. And I think they approach theater that way, not the actual craft or doing the actual work, but as they approach doing it, preparing, rehearsal, and all that good
Mm.
stuff. Um, the quality of the work is the same from East Coast to West Coast. Skilled actors from East Coast and West Coast. It's just their approach to it. It's just and it's so indicative of the culture. And now that you asked me that question, I'm thinking about uh, um, what is it? What is the energy of the rhythm in the rehearsal process here in Atlanta? We're kind of in between. We're kind of in between. We're not too relaxed and we're not too New Yorkish, crazy, crazy, and you know. But so it's different, and I think it's indicative of the communities or the energy of the city. You made me think about something new, Brenda.
Now, going back to the idea of theater and film, at Clark Atlanta University, you have been the head of the theater department, and now you're working with mass communication and film. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was the chair of the speech and communication and theater arts department for 8 years, and now I'm going into my fourth year as the chair of the mass media arts program, which is film, television, and radio, journalism, public relations. Yeah. Hmm.
So the two departments share the same building. Is that right?
Right, and all of the departments, both departments, are under the division of communication arts. And we share the space and we share classes. We students cross over to different departments and take classes to fill the concentration requirements and things like that. Um, and the film students or the television students or the radio students use some of the actors in the theater department to do projects, short films, and things like that. So we intermingle a lot, and which is good for the students. So it's a very unique area, I think.
Having worked at a historically black university college, and having gone to a predominantly white school, what do you see as the differences?
Well, well, I went to undergrad at historical black college, and then I went to two predominantly white PWIs, and one of the things is obvious, is always obvious, is an amount of resources that's available. But the resources cannot be translated into better talent and things of that nature. No, it cannot. I think I learned just as much at, I'm going to put it this way. I learned a lot about technique and what can happen with the resources that you have at a PWI. With the historical black colleges, I learned that also, but not to the extent that it has to do with budget. But I learned something differently, and it was about relationships and how important that
Mm.
is to establish relationships. And some people might say, "Hey, well, I went to a PWI, And I had a relationship with my white counterparts or some of the blacks, but it's a little bit different when you're the first black in a program. So, and you had to get used to them. They had to get used to you. They've not really worked with any black students in the theater department. This was my graduate program. Nor has the administration or the teachers had any black students ever. I was there first, and so the relationship was totally different. So outside of just working, um, that's all we would do: class, work, do the show, and leave. But with historical black colleges, we develop a different kind of community. Um, but it's so interesting that this is an interesting question I'm reflecting. Um, back over that period with the PWI and doing art, is that all of the black artists in the opera school, theater school, which there were actually two of us, but I was the first black male. Um, and all of the arts in the music school, whether it was instrumental or opera, we all gathered together and we got to know each other. And no one said you all had to meet. Nothing was created for us to meet. We just came to know who we were. Uh, and we identified each other and we got together and we formed this group. That didn't have to happen at HBCU. We were in classes, we were doing theater together, and we were part, and we created our communities outside, which really helped infuse some of the theater, some of the art, some of the work that we were doing. I can't remember spending time with at a PWI working with an actor or an actress, um, aside from the rehearsal or going somewhere running lines and things like it didn't happen. But historical black college, we're hanging out, we're going every place together. We pop out our script and say, okay, let's go over this. And so that's the difference. And I think both were very engaging. I learned a lot, um, but I learned how to create family at a historical black college beyond the stage.
Do you think that your experiences or with black institutions versus
Differently,
PWI institutions applies here in Atlanta to professional theater as well?
I've experienced some interesting things here, and I'm not going to repeat certain experiences that I had. But I can tell you this is that when I first got here, a lot of people didn't know, we do remember our dear friend, and who's passed on, Carol Mitchell Leon. She's like my sister, and we would have conversations until wee hours in the morning. Even when I was in LA, I would. It's 2 o'clock on my end, and it's so 5 o'clock. I'm like, you need to go to bed, girl. And we're just talking. But Carol and I was just like, we were brothers and sisters. People actually literally thought I was her brother. And so, and especially when they saw my middle name, which is Leon. And I'm like, no, no, no. And so I had to clear it out. So we talked about everything. And she would always remind me, she would say, do you know you're the first African American male with an MFA in acting teaching at a college here in Atlanta?
Wow.
I went, oh, I didn't know that. And I did a research. And I said, oh yeah, okay. So there was no one. And you had certain people who had higher degrees, like the Shirley Holmes and things like in the PhDs and things of that nature. Um, but I was the only one African American, and so I never forget inquiring about certain things and jobs and things like that. And I asked a certain people, and only two people responded to me this way and says, well, you have to have a MFA or master's degree in theater. And I went, but the way the question was asked, you have to have, instead of asking me the question, do you have? And which I did have. And I went, so you made the assumption that I don't have. And then come to find out that person didn't have. Um, I was actually in a show also when one of the white director here in Atlanta, we were directing, we did a wonderful play, and they discovered that I had a MFA in acting, and they were surprised. They were just totally surprised. But back during that time, there were not many of us in Atlanta. And I was like, okay, I've gotten some certain pushback on certain things because, and I think it has to do with race and white theater and it could be a aggression. I mean, they're not even aware of it that they do, but it's different. And it has been different for me, but in a good way. Um, and it's so interesting. And if I can continue on talking about this, so
Yes.
it's so interesting. Even when I have to be very careful, but not careful in saying fearful, but I have to be very careful when I ask for certain things that I'm directing, and ask for certain things when I'm working with a white theater, and I'm continuously asking for something and making sure that the technical element of what we're doing is right on point, because I understand how involved and engaged and committed for pieces that are not directed by blacks or not black pieces, how sometimes, and it's obvious, they go all out for it, and then they pull back a little bit for us. It still exists. And so I'm a strong proponent of really pushing that envelope, saying, yeah, I need this, I need this, I need this. Um, and so you can get labeled as, and I don't think I'm labeled as being a hard to work with person, but I'm very persistent. I'm very persistent. If Brenda's blouse is not the color that it should be, I'm going to ask you every minute of the rehearsal, every day, why hasn't it changed? Why hasn't it changed? Why hasn't it changed? And I know that's a small thing, but it's very, very, very important, because at the same time, I'm going back to what I mentioned earlier, is that I'm a teacher, and I have to teach people that this is how it's supposed to go. You artistic person asks for something, and it asks for something to help the whole picture of what we're doing. And it serves that actor, it serves me, it serves the institution. So so you have to push sometimes. So yeah, I've seen the difference, and sometimes when I speak up, people get quiet as if, okay, he's angry. I'm like, no, I don't yell or scream. I just say, no, it won't work. Keep looking. Thank you. Yeah. Um, but theater here is good. I like the progression of what has happened. Um, I am still kind of taken aback by the whole idea that there's no per se black theater company. Um, and I understand why, from an educational perspective, why it shouldn't be a black theater company. Is how they treat in terms of funding and a lot, because sometimes when you say black theater company, they say, well, your audience group is going to be very small participants, so you don't need as much money. I'm like, that's why it's small. We need more money so we can have more avenues and connecting with people to make it grow. And yeah, so yeah, it's different, but I'm excited about what you do. And for a part of me, when you decided to do your theater, I thought, God, she's insane. Uh,
Yes.
and I have been approached about 103 times to start a theater. I'm like, oh no, I will not. I wouldn't dare do that. But I would help. It's a lot. It's a lot. And you have to realize what your wheelhouse is. And my wheelhouse is directing and educational theater. Just being there to support. And one of the things you mentioned also is that we have to be very, very careful about um, D&I, diversity and inclusion, without incorporating equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I keep hearing and seeing diversity and inclusion, which is good. But when you talk about equity, when you leave out equity, uh, you're leaving out a component which says, I'm going to bring Brenda in to meet this particular initiative that we have. And she's just African American female. She's coming in and she's doing this. And so diversity we're inclusion, we're doing very good. But what about the equity? And the equity is that she's coming in as this, and we're making it so where she can move up the ladder That's the equity where she is making a decision to do the hiring. And see, when you look at other theaters, just like and that's not really happening here. When you look at Victory Gardens, which is most recent in Chicago, that's equity. They did diversity and inclusion, but that's equity, putting a Black guy over the Victory Gardens Theater. That is total equity. I mean, just as white and Jewish as it could be back in the day. What was his name? Sajak, the artistic director, who was there for at least 50-some years. Um, the So that's equity, allowing that to happen, but not just saying we're going to put this person in this position, that we're going to allow them some longitude and latitude to make decisions about certain things and part of the hiring process. So being in the room and sitting in a chair and occupying a chair is fine, but who's still making the decisions? That's what equity is about. That's what so we have to create wonderful opportunities, and like yourself, create your own theater. Um, and hopefully people will learn from that. Yeah.
So what projects are you working on now? What's coming up?
Oh my God. It's so much fun. I'm just so exhausted with fun. I have, in the last year and a half, I have been ushered into directing 3 pilots for television. And and the reason why I'm saying I've been ushered is like, I've always had an interest in the back of my head. And now I'm in the mass media arts department. I'm around all this technology. I've been playing around with it. I've been using it. People have been introducing me to it. And I've been learning things, camera and all that good stuff. And it just so happens that all this stuff is happening now. And I guess the universe was saying, okay, the universe knows this about me. And I don't know if anyone interprets their life like this, is that I have to be trained and skilled and feel comfortable in my knowledge, in terms of learned knowledge, before I approach anything. I have to learn how to dial the phone. You got to teach me before I dial it. Okay, you got to teach me. And if I don't think I've learned it properly, I'm not going to touch that phone. And so I've been learning all these things. And so so producing and directing um, uh, 3 pilots. And been rehearsing and working in these virtual readings, working with your theater company. And when I got back in town, I thought I would take a break. And one of our wonderful people that who called me until I got back on out there was a Dai Moon. And he said, no one, I mentioned your name and no one knows you're here. What's up with you? And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to do this education thing over here. And I started working with him, then I just finished a piece with the French Theater here with Carolyn Cook, which was wonderful. So I'm moving in areas, even with this piece that I did with them last Sunday, and rehearsed and was the West African, Cameroonian plays, and they were awesome. And I, as an educator, I began to explore this new Bole Bote plays, and quite interesting, about corruption and Africa and colonialism. I'm like, when the last time I said colonialism? And so, yeah, so that's it. Now, I don't know when, as an actor, I'm not excited about being excited about going on stage. Something tells me I should. I've been asked, I'm like, and I've grown to the point, and I knew it happened a long time ago, where I love the process of acting, but I got to the point where once I rehearse a show, I'm like, okay, I can go home now. Then they tell me, you got to perform it for 2-3 weeks. I'm like, what? I got to do what? Oh no, I've already had my fun. I don't need to do it in front of people. And I realized I love the process. And then I had to translate things a different way. In that as a director, I get to play all the roles. So it's like, okay, I'm cool. So I get to feel that what I need to feel as an artist, that I'm actually working and I'm a part of the creative process. Yeah. Reframing, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, I have to reframe things, but I'm not excited. And I never knew as an actor that I would, and the strangest thing happened, I never knew as an actor that I would get to the place, and maybe it'll change, that I would say, "Mm, I don't feel like acting. I don't want to." And so, even in my education of teaching students, I always say, get something, another career that you can work at. And so, hopefully, and sometimes they interpret I'm saying they're not going to be successful, but I'm saying, but that too, and they need more money. I look at it. You need a reality job to pay for your fantasy profession. So, which I understand, and I I I never knew that I would get to the point where I wouldn't. I would tell my agent in LA, and I would go. The things that actors look forward to, and one of the things they look forward to is going to audition at casting, and then going to the producers and auditioning again because you've been moved on. So it got to a place where I was moved straight to producers in my auditions, which was really great. And then my agent at the time thought I had lost my mind. I started canceling. And he's like, is something wrong? I'm like, I'm not I'm not interested in acting anymore. And he said, do you, and the people dream of having this. I'm like, yeah, I know, but that's not where I am. And I started doing my little research of all the wonderful actors who just changed their minds. I can't even think of their names, but I kind of still do and say people who just bow down and say, no, I don't feel like doing this anymore. I want to do something else in life. And so sometimes we think that, oh, you're an actor, so you want to do this. Just like any career, you want to say, I've had enough of that. I have enough of that way. And I felt that way. So I tell students, you might wake up one morning like I did and say, I don't want to do this like this anymore. It was good to me. Nothing happened bad. I just that I changed my mind, or I wanted another way to approach this, and the other way has been very fruitful to my spirit. I think. But I love working with actors, even the difficult ones. And
Yeah.
and a lot of people, and when I tell people this, they look at me strangely. I tell people, I said, actually, really, what I really in the acting field, what the only thing that I wanted to do in acting, I just wanted to be a soap actor. That's it. That's it. Daytime drama. That's it. And when I went to New York after graduate school, I went to every training you could think of in soap technique. And sometimes you had casting and producers who would come to some of the classes. And every class, I said about eight, every class, and someone would come and visit the class, and I would get an extra role out of their visit or under five roles. So I would get booked jobs and jobs. And the interesting thing that happened is that I was so deep in it that I was working with the Gene Franco Theater doing Dutchman with Gene Franco, and Gene Franco, uh, uh, his his claim to fame, it's off Broadway, yeah. His claim for fame was the play The Blacks with Cicely Tyson, uh, Jeffrey Holder, Roscoe Lee, all those cats back in the day. And so I was doing the show, and it just so happens that he knew the casting of all my children. And so they were going through a phase where Jesse was going to leave the role. And so they started auditioning, and I was sent in to audition for the replacement. And maybe this has something to do with my saying, I'm sick of this. But I didn't end my career there. And I went there and to the audition, and it was the most wonderful experience. And because I had had all these classes, I knew my lines when I went. I went into the casting. Gene Franco knew the casting person. They were dear friends. He sent me over, and I walked in, and she says immediately, "Oh my God, you're too young," because Angie was playing younger And I was younger than Jessie, just a few years. And she said, "No, it won't look good. You being the girl, a boyfriend to her, it just wouldn't look good." And I said, "Okay." And so I said, "What can I read for you anyway?" And I read for her. And I never forget this experience. And I have a few experiences like this. She went, "Oh my God. Oh my God." And I guess she sensed that I had really been trained as a soap act. I mean, soap actor scripts to me are horrible, but it was like that was the challenging moment, taking a horrible script, not horrible, but and you gotta make it happen. And if you can do that, you can. It's like the Shakespeare. You can go at it. And so I did it. I did the lines, and she said, "Oh my God." Oh my God. And she kept saying, "Oh my God." She said, "What I want you to do," and this is so funny. I lived in Jamaica, Queens at that time, but this was in Manhattan. And so, do you remember a guy named Harold Moore? He was a theater person back in the day. So he lived in New York, around where Sam and Latanya and all those people lived. And they all hung out together. And so she said, "So what I need you to do, I need you to go and put on some clothes that make you look older." I'm like, "And come back in 3 hours." I said, "Okay." And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "Because they gotta meet you. They gotta meet you." And I went to Harold's house back in Harlem, and 119th and St. Nick, and came on back. And I had these clothes on, the jacket and everything, and everything. And I auditioned in front of the producers, and the we had a reader. This young lady would read. There were three guys, two other guys and myself, and she would go in with everyone and read, and get feedback from the producer and come back. And so the two went in, and they came out one by one, and I went in, and the little girl and I read, and they stopped, and they threw me some more stuff to do, and they stopped, and they kept doing that. They stopped, and the producers said, "My God, you're really good." He said, "Please don't go anywhere." And they said, "But you're too young." And I did not notice, but the reader walked out, the young lady who was reading with us. And this moment, and she interpreted it this way, this moment would have changed my life if I were old enough. And I walked outside to leave, and she was bawling, crying. And I was like, "What's up with you?" She said, "Oh my God, to be told that you're not going to get a role because you don't look old enough." And she was crying. She said, "Because you were better than all of the guys I went in there. Those two guys, you were way better." And she said, "Just to be told that," she said, "I am so sorry." And I said, "You did a wonderful job, blah, 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 blah." And so that happened. Should I finish my stories or
Yes,
continue on?
please.
That
Please.
happened.
I'm intrigued.
And then the next week, I get this audition that so I didn't get the role for that. They told me don't go anywhere. Then I auditioned. There were three things, big things happened. And they were doing the 25th anniversary of A Raisin in the Sun with Esther Roll, and I auditioned for Asa guy. And they actually went with an African guy, actually. I didn't get it. But the strangest thing happened. Robert Nemiroff, uh, Lorraine Hansberry's husband, was still living. And he called me, and he said uh, that, explained that they went with someone who's African and who's an actor. But he said basically the same thing that the all my children people. He said, "You're wonderful. Do not go anywhere." He said, just don't." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "But this doesn't happen." Not Robert Nemiroff call actors and tell them. And like, okay. So I didn't get that. So strike three happened. So I was called in. We were called in. They were doing Fences with James Earl Jones, and three or four of us were called in because Courtney Vance was going to go on vacation, and they need a replacement. And they gave us free tickets. I can remember being on probably the fifth row watching the show and seeing James Earl Jones, whose feet looked about 15, size 28. And I was like, "Oh my God." And I was looking at his feet. He was saying we were right there, and we were like mesmerized. And so it just so happened that he didn't go on vacation and didn't get that either. So I was like, okay, I'm sick of all this. And so about a few months later, I packed up and went to Chicago and started working there. And I never went back to New York to work. But New York was really, really good to me. I did soaps. I did under five, had roles, had a little bitty reoccurring detective role for a young guy on Ryan's Hope. It was like, oh my God. And Search for Tomorrow. People used to say Search for Tomorrow. They're like, what? That was a what? Uh, I'm like, yeah. And so that, and so Chicago didn't do any soaps. There weren't any soaps there, but did Bold and the Beautiful in LA and things like that, because that's, and if someone says right now to me, come on and do this soap right now, I would do it. Someone said, come and do this Broadway show. I'm like, are you crazy? I don't feel like doing that. Just tell them, no, thank you. Come and do this movie? Nah, I really don't. Come and do this television show? Come and do this soap? I'm here with you. I'm gonna be here with you. I just love it.
Really?
Yep. So yep. Those are my wonderful, wonderful experiences as an actor. I worked with a lot of wonderful people. Learned a lot. Um, and I think the funniest part about being in this career, you find out who knows who's connected to who. But I never knew that I was related to Esther Rolle until we started working together. So I leave LA and come to do A Raisin in the Sun in Atlanta, directed by Woody King. And every time I walked in, she would say, "You remind me of someone." Listen, and we became friends and each other's punching bag and jokesters and everything. We just had a ball. We would cut up. And you remember Thomasina,
Mm-hmm.
the stage? She would have to tell Miss Roll and I to shut up, stop talking so much in rehearsal. And Esther would go, and I go, sir. And so she and I were just having too much fun. And so my cousin in LA calls me and said, where are you? I've been calling and said, oh, I'm in Atlanta. I'm doing A Raisin in the Sun. Oh, you're doing it with Auntie? I said, what? His mother and my mother are first cousin. Not just first cousin. They were like close, where they visit each other's home. But I forgot their name is Rolle, Rolle, like Esther Rolle. And it never dawned on me. So I said, what? He said, Roll? And I said, yeah, that's right. I said, I never put it together. And he talks to her, because she lived in LA. He talked to her on the phone often, like every other week, and they would go out to lunch stuff. But I didn't know that story, that they hung out like that. And so I went in and I just walked in and I said, Brian Roll. That's it. How do you know him? I said, my cousin. She said, I knew it. She said, come here, baby.
What advice do you have for Atlanta theater?
The advice that I have for Atlanta theater is an advice that I have for Atlanta Black theater. And is that to collectively create our own facility, which I want to be a big part of, a huge part of. And I always say this is that you can have, the facility really dictates a lot, especially programming. And if you don't own the space, then someone walks in and say, oh, okay, I'm raising your rent or whatever, that affects your programming. So you can't do as much as you want. But to control your own space, some of us have good credit. I'd say if we all put our credit and everything together, we could pull something off. Yeah, I know I could have started the initiative. It's not too late. Performing Arts Black Center, where all of the Black theaters go and perform, and we all share. Meaning, I envision a place, the African Heritage Performance Arts Center. What that would encompass is Impact Theater, Imata, the dance company, YEA, and all the Black or people of color theater will have a part in that whole calendar year where they have a portion where they're in there. And I've also envisioned all the Black theater organization and companies in terms of theater and dance, a plaque on the wall, those that are defunct and those that are existing in the lobby. Where that's that educational part of the history. So what Atlanta needs to do is all the Black theater groups need to really come together and sit down and say, let's create a plan to create a facility in which each of us have an equal partnership in. And that's how we're going to really sort of beat this part of the underrepresented or underfunded thing that happens in this community and in other cities as well. We have to collectively work. And when you think about the Alliance Theater and all these other places, especially the Alliance Theater, when you go back into their history, what created that was a bunch of people who do not look like us who got together and they decided to create that. And so that's what really, really should happen. We got to create our own. And I think you have a lot of Black kids who are trying to do theater in a different way and addressing certain issues, and they're entrepreneurs, and they're trying to make it happen. And I think they would jump on this. I mean, places like Tiny Theater could be a part of this, and a lot of other young Black groups can be a part of this. You'd be surprised. It can sustain itself. It just has to be done. And it can be built from the ground up. You never know. That's what I believe, and that's where we need to go.
Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down on the couch with me today. And for you out there, please come back and join us next week when we'll have another exciting conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, comment below, and like us. And thank you once again, Garry Yates.
Thank you, Brenda. It was a pleasure. I'm excited about what you're doing in the theater community in Atlanta, Georgia.